I'm sorry.
Did you get that? Well, no one was seated like 3 minutes ago, 4 minutes ago. So sorry.
What do you find out?
Absolutely. Okay. I'm really sorry.
You're good. We got a call.
You guys are good.
We're not going to flood.
It's an this is the plan. This is my, this is my stage welcome, yeah. Well, welcome to everybody. Quick question. This is the first time they've been to 1871? Do we have a few? I love it. Who has been to a Creative Science only before? Just a few, but I love it. Look at all this. Did you? Jason knows the drill. He knows what's up. But I do want to ask a couple new questions. Question for you guys. Who here is a founder? Anyone? Okay, we've got a few founders in the room. Awesome. How about who works at like a growth stage company, maybe? A large company. Okay. Corporates, anybody? Okay, and now who's looking for a job? Awesome. Okay, no, this is fun. So before we started, when we were walking around, we were networking, there was a lot of folks that were here that are kind of looking and exploring in between things. And I think that this is such a fun, unique environment of kind of that open space that you can really have those conversations and kind of meet people and talk about that. That I just wanted to call that out, that you guys look here, that this is not the normal people that you may normally network with, and how do you really get into that? And so 1871, for those, this is new for so many people here. We exist to inspire, support, and equip early stage founders, growth stage founders who will work with those companies, and corporate innovators to build extraordinary businesses. We do that through community, resources, and programming across that full maturity curve and for even those big enterprises. One of those community types events is this event this evening, as we are here together for this Creative Minds Only event. We run these every few months, and we always bring different folks with different experiences on the stage. And so what I hope you get from the stage tonight, and I really challenge you, is some of the insights. Some of you are going to take that and bring it back to work. Others are going to look at that and go, how does this really, what does it mean for my career journey? And so wanted to kind of start with that as you're thinking about what is 1871, what is this event, how do I kind of take advantage of it? If you love this event, I'll remind you at the end, but we do have recordings of all of these sessions that you can go back to. There's nuggets in every single one, every time I leave inspired. And so with that, I'm very excited for this conversation. We've got an awesome panelists. I'm sorry for my tardiness. I think that's the first time that's ever happened, like ever. But you guys are on it. And with that, Jason.
Can we give Stephanie a round of applause? Just appreciate you all being here. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Jason Howard, co-founder of the Garage Group and founder of the Courageous Minds Only community. CGG, which we affectionately call the Garage Group, really exists to help corporate leaders keep their brands and brand portfolios relevant in uncertainty. It's an amazing company, been doing work for, gosh, 13 years now in the innovation space. And then Courageous Minds Only, we created really to unlock courage in leaders with courage, inspiration, and ideas as you're all looking to build the future of your careers and businesses in uncertainty. And I feel like we're at a time right now where it's fine, but it hasn't been that as uncertain. When you think about AI, you think about a lot of the disruption that's happening in the market. And I typically have a call to action to put your phone down and try to find one actionable thing that you can take out of the conversation and apply to your career and your life. But I feel like for me, and maybe it might just be me, but I don't think it is. I feel like we're at an inflection point now, and we all need to be pursuing like learning and growth with urgency, both for ourselves, but also just encouraging those around us. Like, think about tonight as a moment for yourselves where you're obviously investing your time, virtual audience, you guys are investing your time. Think about tonight as a moment for you where you're committing to like develop yourself with urgency and seeking new ideas, new mindsets, new experiences that you can apply to keep yourself like relevant, your career relevant in a lot of the uncertainty we're seeing now. But I think next decade, as you start to see Adam, he's deep in AI. He'll share a lot with us about that. Like, it's coming and it's coming quick. So, and it's going to disrupt everything. So, being a part of this tonight, we're on that learning journey, challenge yourself to get better. I love it. That's the expectation of the conversation tonight. So, with that, like, let's dive in. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves as we go forward. Like, we always start these conversations with not like, I like to start with the hardest question. Like, what's the most courageous, or one of the most courageous things you've had to do in your career? And we'll get more into that in the conversation. So, Chris, if you want to kick us off, Kurt's, introduce yourself, but then Kurt's story, and we'll keep rolling.
Of course. I'm Chris Woodolson. I work for Nielsen IQ. I lead our small, medium, and emerging brands portfolio on our basic innovation team. So we live and breathe that all day, every day. I like to say on the part of for me, honestly, we can start with a really hard question. Thanks for that, Jason. I would probably say one of the most courageous things that I had to do in my career was I inherited a team that was not in the best space, both internally and externally. And instead of doing what those before me and those around me had chosen to do, of sweeping things under the rug and not addressing the core problems, I decided to take those things head on and try to fix the environment because people weren't in a position to bring their full selves to work and be the best for us or for our clients. And it wasn't easy. In fact, it was quite difficult, but it was worth it for me because the outcome was a much better, healthier environment for us as well as the relationships with our clients.
Love it. Bro?
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. So, this is a little loud here. Raul Ruiz, I'm the Senior Vice President of Instant Brands. So Instant Brands, if you're not familiar, it's housewares and small kitchen appliance organization. We have brands such as Pyrex, Corel, and Instant Pot. I think a couple of people here mentioned to me that they have an Instant Pot at home, so thanks for your support. So for me, as far as one of the courageous moments that I've done in my career professionally was leaving what was a very comfortable public organization and enter the world of a private equity platform. So I had an opportunity that was brought to me a few years ago where everything sounds fantastic, where you're managing a business unit, you're reporting to the CEO, you're really stretching yourself professionally, and you're leaving an environment that is a very stable, where there's career progression, there's robust resources, there's robust infrastructure into a world that is very ambiguous. It's very dynamic, which can be exciting, but it's also very fluid. The private equity companies can sometimes have a strategy one week and then the next week the strategy changes. So, and you have to be willing to work in an environment that is that dynamic and be okay with it. And at the same time, manage down to an entire organization that is looking for stability. So for me, Jason, that's probably the biggest courageous move that I did was take on that opportunity and step into a role that may be uncomfortable, but at the same time help stretch me professionally.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anu?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So for those that don't know me, my name is Anu Shaw. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for a startup called Pleasy. And Pleasy is a kids nutrition brand that's trying to disrupt the kids beverage space with lower sugar, better for you options, more nutrient dense. We're private equity backed. So any parents, please try us. We're in Walmart's, Targets. It's a cool opportunity because it also extends our co-founders, Michelle Obama. So it kind of builds off her legacy, which is in the White House around the Let's Move initiative. And so there's a lot of credibility there. My story though is I spent most of my career at big companies. So I was at Pepsi, most Coors. I see Jonathan back work with this guy at Constellation. And so I was always thought about, how do I break into that private equity, smaller entrepreneurial environment and wanted to do that, but met with a lot of resistance because every time we talk to the PE firms, they're like, you're a big company guy, you're not gonna fit. And I learned a lot through that process that we can talk about in the next hour about how to position yourself as, and the best piece of advice I got from a recruiter was, how do you really position yourself as big company trained, but small company scrappy? And really, really using that and talking about examples that can extend to that PE world to make you more successful and make you less of a risk for them to take you on. So that was part of it. I was able to pivot the new role, joined Pleasy last year. have loved it so far. It's been about a year. You know, it's terrifying sometimes. Like every day, you're like, are we gonna make it to Friday? And some days you're like, we're gonna change the world. So it's been a fun journey. I think we'll talk a little bit about this later, but you do lose the safety net. I mean, I think when you go from the Pepsis and the Molson Coors, you do lose the company culture and you're building things. But it's super rewarding, and I've loved it so far.
I love it. Adam?
So my name is Adam Wisniewski. I'm the CEO and founder of EX3 Labs. We're actually a company based on the 30th floor here at 1871. It was funny because when you and Stephanie repeated the question around how many people have been here for the first time in 1871, I remember in 2016 when I was asked that similar question. It was January. I remember it was really cold. The event I came to, I remember walking through the door for the first time and was standing alone. It was absolutely bananas. I'm surprised I hadn't been plugged into the system a little bit earlier on in the process, but they also asked the question, how many people are here are founders or thinking about starting a company, and I raised my hand relatively reluctantly. And less than a year after going full time with the startup, we hit $1 million in revenue as a company. And there was just a few of us, and we didn't have any financial backing. It's completely bootstrapped. So I am a big proponent and fans of these types of events because that's actually how it kind of plugged into ecosystem, the Chicago tech community. I would probably say that one of the biggest courageous moments that I had was very similarly is taking the leaps. Everyone has kind of mentioned leaps and even challenging moments with colleagues or leadership. The big piece for me was not just leaving a comfortable and kind of cushy job, but I think with a lot of founders, there's a notion of the imposter syndrome, which is, do I actually have the skills and capabilities to pull this off? And the reality is everybody has that feeling early on, and you just have to embrace the fact that there's got to be a lot of uncertainty and unknown. You have to go forward anyways. I'm a comic book fan. I did not like the third Dark Knight series from Christopher Nolan. I don't know how many people have seen that, but there was one scene, and it will be a spoiler alert for those of you who haven't seen it, but it's been out for 17 years, so that demarcation line is whatever. There was that one scene where you try to get out of the cave, and the secret to getting out of the cave after you tried a dozen times to get out was no rope. If you try without a rope, you don't have the safety net, and you're going to force yourself to change your mindset around how you go after something, which is if it's all or nothing, you have to prepare yourself to go for it and go all in, which means there's nothing to fall back on, so you have to make it work. So that was my mentality that I had back then, and I didn't really have a choice but to go all in.
It's a good segue. So if I think about my career when I had the all-in moments, when I had to take a risk and challenge myself, like I feel like I learned the most, I grew the most. I appreciated the process, maybe in retrospect, more so than a lot of things. And I'm curious as you think about kind of the inflection points around the risks that you guys took and or other examples. What did you learn about yourself through the process? Like, I'm curious, and or what did the resilience that was you created through making those choices, like, how did that enable you to take bigger risks? So, I know you want to jump in there.
Yeah, what you said earlier about being terrified. I remember I've been in big companies the last 20 years. I've never been more terrified before I started Pleasy than any of those roles. Because when you go from leading a team of 50 or wherever you're going, Molson or Pepsi, you kind of know what to do. You know what environment to get into. I was the CMO and I was a team of one, so I had to literally build it from scratch. Which I've never been in that position before. So you go in, you think about, okay, what do you know? Ask the right questions. You lean on your mentors, lean on my kitchen cabinet, and just really ask good questions and just take I've always used the analogy by the elephant one by the time. And so that's kind of how I look at it. So you're not going to basically solve everything day one, but focus on the biggest problems and just kind of chunk things out. And so
What what did you learn about yourself through that pivot of being kind of a general marketing manager to like literally just building capability from scratch, essentially? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just prioritization. So, what are we gonna really focus on day one? What needs to happen? What do we need to be successful? And just really focus on the things that matter and the things that are gonna drive the business day one.
Adam, how about you, man?
I think when I think about inflection points, part of it has to do with kind of balancing, disciplining your disappointments. And I think for me, anytime you pitch an idea to a customer, or you try to get a sale, or you talk to somebody about an idea to try to form a partnership, and it doesn't go your way, usually what I found in those moments, I give myself 15 seconds to punch a wall, get mad, curse, whatever I need to do, and then I move on. And the reason why I say that is because 9 times out of 10, if something doesn't happen the exact way that you want it to, it's usually for a reason. Like long term, you can look back on it and say that wasn't a good fit. That probably wasn't the best customer for me to be partnered up with, whether they had too high demands or whether they would, go back and forth with you on pricing, whatever the case may be. So I think the inflection points are always around discipline, disciplining your disappointments and not getting too high on highs, not getting too low on the lows, because there's usually an opportunity right around the corner. One case in point for us was, I think, we started off by, as a human-centered design company, really, talking companies through how to create better designs for their customers. We do a lot of design sprints, subscribe a lot to human-centered design principles and design thinking. And it was one of the epiphanies that we had is, we were thinking about charging a certain amount to a client, and we realized that one of our competitors was charging, I don't know, maybe 15 times more. And we really had to ask ourselves, why would a customer go down that direction versus us? And why don't we value ourselves enough to charge that much? Because sometimes, again, back to the imposter syndrome, can I even be charging that? What's the respect level? And then one of my mentors has always taught me how to walk away from the deal if it doesn't feel right, and being comfortable with that. So I think the inflection points for me are always around having more courageous conversations with yourself internally and making sure that you are battle ready for whatever comes your way.
So we talked a lot about this with like kind of speaking out with conviction in terms of creating kind of that courage ripple effect. I'm curious, like when you think about kind of the moment when you spoke with conviction and you kind of set a new course for your team, like what did that enable in you as a leader? Like how did that build your confidence, conviction to kind of keep it going? Because you're obviously on a roll now, right? So
Honestly, it served as a reminder of the importance of being comfortable, being uncomfortable. 7 days a week, because everything isn't going to be easy. Everything isn't going to flow exactly how you want it to or plan it out, and that's okay. That's the real work. And that was something that living through that experience, helping everybody get on the other side of it, seeing the positive outcomes of taking that leap, not knowing that it was gonna work out, because I'm sure everybody in this room has been in a situation where, do I say something, do I not, because if I do, what's gonna happen? And instead of worrying about that, it was more important to try and affect the change. And it actually, to me, circles back to your commentary around imposter syndrome. I have a challenge for everybody in this room, including the people on this panel. Imposter syndrome, in my humble opinion, is only applicable to people who aren't qualified for the job. If you put in the work, if you've done everything you need to do to prepare yourself, you have no right to feel like you're an imposter. So I challenge everybody to think about that, because I hear that phrase so much from so many people, and it makes me sad sometimes. Because I'm like, well, wait, so what are you saying? Were you just handed a bunch of promotions that you didn't earn? Like, what are we talking about here? But that's not the conversation I'm hearing right now. So I just challenge everybody to not discount all the work and effort you put in, because being more comfortable, being uncomfortable, you're putting yourself in a situation to work.
Good about that more. Can we give that a round of applause? Everyone? Probably like, you framed it up before in terms of traditional, like, great career path, multi-brand organization, tons of resources, and you jumped into uncertainty and figuring shit out with like limited resources. So I'm curious in terms of, as you've taken that risk and kind of gotten through that, what have you learned about yourself, and has that built greater resiliency in you and your leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, talking about, the imposter syndrome and a little bit of self-doubt, I think probably the biggest thing that came out of me of the entire experience is resilience and perseverance. So, I think when I look back at my career, I worked with some of the most talented people in CPG. So the VP of Sharpie, the VP of Modelo, the VP of the modern oral business of the last company I was with. So I almost didn't believe that I wasn't ready for a managing director role at Instant Brands. And so I think the ability to be able to believe and trust in what you've done in the past, to be able to step into these significant higher roles is what allowed me to break through. Because while I was working in each of those distinct roles, I actually felt as though I was in the hot seat. Even though it wasn't me in the hot seat, I felt like I was next to each of my VPs, and that was me in the hot seat. I wanted to make sure that they were always looking good. So the moment that I stepped into this role, I am in the hot seat. And I didn't necessarily have, uh, uh, I didn't believe that I had a person like myself to help me, but I realized that there's an entire team that's dedicated, that is willing to put in the hours and the effort to make the shit happen, as you mentioned. So I think for me it was really, one, believing in myself, and then second, understanding that I'm not in the organization alone. There's a team of very dedicated individuals. There's a team of people that want to make business grow, and that they ultimately want to have their own career paths, and they want to make things happen for their own organization. So I think the biggest part was definitely that resilience and perseverance to know that everything that I've done in the past can actually become an even greater solution. Moving forward.
Yeah, I also think like when you're in those situations, you're not expected to know all the answers, right? A lot of it is ask the right questions, lean on your team, lean on your mentors, because there's no way you're gonna have every answer. I'm stepping in a role, I've been a marketer most of my life, and now I'm leading finance, operations, supply chain. I don't have the first clue on some of those things, but I lead my team, ask the right questions, let them empower them, and then we go back and forth. So I think a lot of it is you're not gonna be an expert on everything. And the key is in acknowledging that, understanding when do you have to step in and when do you have to ask the right questions.
Can I just build on that really quickly? Because what you just said is so important. And I think it's a fact that so few people acknowledge. Nobody's perfect. I can't stress that enough. No one is perfect. No one walks into any new role. Nobody, and knows everything. So the best thing you can do for yourself, whether you're starting a company, whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're leading a team, whether you're the CEO, acknowledge that there are other people who know things you don't know. And that's okay. That doesn't make you less than, that doesn't make you unintelligent. It's okay to acknowledge that there's more for you to know.
I want to take it back to like before you guys made the decision to speak up, to change roles, to start a startup, and then pivoted. I feel like just about every person in this room is in transition at some level, whether it's significant pressure on their role, maybe they're operating a business where there's pressure on a business model, looking for new opportunities, just burnt the F out and ready for the next like role, like whatever, right? I think it's easy, not easy, but we talked about the transition, we talked about the fruit of it. I want you to go back before you made the decision. Like what led to kind of the uneasiness, and what gave you the courage to even make the decision in the first place, take the role to start the business, speak up with courage. You want to kick us off here?
Sure, honestly, it was a simple one. I wanted to be the leadership I wanted at that time, because it didn't exist, unfortunately. And I've seen enough examples where there were opportunity areas to be a more transformational leader, and people just weren't willing to take that on because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to change things, especially when they're ingrained in the culture. And for me, it was just wanting to be the leadership that I want.
Bro,
Yeah, so for me, looking back, I think it starts with baby steps and just, taking, having conviction at what you believe businesses should do. So I think, looking back on the Medela business, for example, Christina used to be on the Medela team here. Hey, Christina. So one of the biggest, today Medela is the number one beer in America, right? But at the time, when we were on the Medela team, it wasn't. And we had a big challenge of potentially, we had a growth target. There was just one consumer demographic that we thought was the only one that was buying beer. And we had to think a little unconventional and look at the data and say, hey, actually growth is coming from a different consumer base, and go against the grain and potentially debunk a myth that that Medela beer can only be grown by one consumer target versus a total market. And so we had to go around pitching that idea and that story, and slowly by slowly we had wins. And so I think as you build those wins in a career, you start becoming even more and more confident to take more chances and choices. So I think for me, ultimately, from that story to the next company and ultimately to Instant Brands, it just allowed me to feel more and more comfortable taking uncomfortable positions.
that certainly rings true with me in terms of taking those early risks, and then you're kind of, again, it creates a ripple effect of resiliency. And to your point, like, you don't have to have it all figured out, but it gives you the confidence to step into the space and then just pursue it. Adam, I'm curious, any perspective on, we were just talking about in terms of, what led to the decision to even start the startup and to pivot?
Man, I think the biggest thing for me back then was just trusting my own voice. Especially, I had started multiple startups before that, but I think what was different about that, and some of them had got bought out. One of my first startups got ranked in the top 40 in the US, got blown out. So it was when TechStars first launched at M&T Boston, that first cohort. So I got flown out to Boston, MIT for that idea. And I remember just being so excited about being in a room. And I don't know if you've all heard of Genius, one of the Geniuses of a big startup that came out of that same cohort. They were right next to me in that same cohort. And I remember you get assigned mentors, and some of these people, I think one of them sold Pinnacle Software for like $400 million. That was my mentor for that group. And then David Cohen was a mentor who founded TechStars. And he gave some amazing advice on pricing. But the mentor that I had during that session, and I had a few others, because we would just do these breakout sessions and they'd give me advice on marketing and pricing and all of that. And I remember afterwards just thinking to myself, I don't know if that's the decision, that's the direction I want to go based on the advice that they give. And it proved out to actually be true in my case. And that isn't always the scenario, but I think you do have to trust your own voice, your instincts. And I've thought very methodically around who I let give me advice, because there's the difference between mentors and advisors. And I think mentors have what you want. Therefore, I think their opinion should be weighted differently in terms of how you absorb it versus advisors that are just generally coming in that may not know your space. They may not even have expertise there, but of course, everybody has an opinion.
Yeah, so I found that in my career, whenever I've taken a leap, that's when I've really grown. Whenever I've like taken a risk, made myself uncomfortable, that's when I grow. So my advice is, whenever you feel like you're in a role and you're not learning, you're not challenging yourself, you're comfortable, you need to force change because you're just not growing. And I found that to be true. It might be uncomfortable at first, but I think that's when you get the most professional growth.
This is great. I want to shift the conversation a little bit more like from the interpersonal side, the more kind of what's happening in the market. I think it's, we talk about these things. I think it's interesting for more so to be able to, like, for the audience in here in Chicago and virtual, just things maybe you can take back in terms of things as you're building your career, but also brands. So just kind of maybe listen through that lens. I think the first thing I want to start off with, I think it's super interesting, probably, when we were kind of talking about things around innovation, and I think it'd be helpful. I found it's helpful for me of how you create the context for growth in terms of innovation, but also just with limited resources, some of the tools that you guys are using, both limited resources, but also from a speed standpoint. Maybe you can kick us off and then we'll keep going.
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost is taking a mentality of test and learn. So the ability of test and learn allows you to try new ideas, new technologies, and then ultimately scale them if they work, if they don't work. So they're generally calculated risks. So an example is there's a AI platform called Yogi that super fan of. If you haven't heard of Yogi, they are an AI platform that leverages, that's an aggregator for ratings and reviews. It has the ability to go through hundreds, even thousands of reviews of products and very instantly take actionable insights from a qualitative perspective into quantitative. So it can pull together themes on product optimizations. It can help mine ideas for product innovations. It has truly transformed the way you look at ratings and reviews. For example, us as brand marketers, we would look at ratings and reviews and we'd have to sift through dozens. There's no way we could go through hundreds of reviews, but we'd sift through dozens and dozens looking to prepare for line reviews with customers. The Yogi platform allows you to very instantly come up with themes. What does it mean for a retailer? How does it compare to the competition in seconds? And I think that that's just one example of an AI platform that is changing the efficiency and effectiveness of how we work today in business. Yeah.
And my encouragement to the group here too is think about not necessarily what you do and how you do it today, but what's the outcome I'm trying to drive to, and are there tools and things that can help me that way? So that's super interesting. Anu?
Yeah,
Not necessarily AI. Like I think like in your context, like what's interesting. Like we had talked before about just as you're going after kind of the Gen Alpha, but also just this idea of like speaking to mom and kid at the same time.
So
some of the challenges that you guys are up against there.
The challenge we have, I think, on Plessy, so if you look at the kids beverage market, there's brands that really speak to kids, so they drive affinity to kids. So Prime's a perfect example. That's driven that cool factor with Logan Paul, but knows trust with parents. And then you have brands on the other side that are really speaking to moms, or better for you brands that really have no affinity with kids. And what we're trying to do with Plessy is really build trust with moms through affiliation with Michelle Obama and all the better for you credentials we have, but really make the brand Gen's Alpha forward. So make it all about Gen's Alpha. Tastes great, make it very cool for kids. So that's our challenge, because I think that if we can do that, we can drive a brand that kids actually want to drink, but actually is better for you. And that's what we're going to go after and try to solve for.
How about you,
I mean, I would probably say less on the tool side, just more on the mindset side of how to use tools is definitely using voice more. So, we work with a lot of healthcare organizations, and one of the things that I've talked to them about physicians during keynotes is how do you make sure that you're getting some of your time back, right? There's a concept for physicians called the gym, which is a large percent of their time is spent doing administrative kind of note-taking, reporting patient outcomes, et cetera, within the context of the evening, right after they have a full shift, right? So physicians can save 70%, as much as 70% of the time spent doing that activity just by using their voice instead of typing things in. So the same applies for everybody in this room, regardless of what your profession is, or even in a personal context, whether you're sending a message to a loved one, leveraging that microphone on your, whether it's a document that you're producing, or whether it's a text message you're sending, email, making sure that you can get some of your time back through those more advanced methods of communicating, but also making sure in the text-to-speech synthesis side that you're preparing for the future, because most of the tools that we're going to be using going forward are going to have some type of natural language processing that happens through voice.
Chris, I want to hear your perspective on just kind of brand proliferation and that sort of thing. But then Adam, I have a few follow-up questions I want to ask you. Why don't you dive in here and then we'll keep rolling.
Sure, and I feel like what I'm gonna say actually touches on some of what everybody said. But generally speaking, purposeful innovation. Because one of the biggest challenges we see as the testers of innovation at Macy's is no matter what size the company is, you can be a startup, you can be a global national company. If you are not innovating with a focus on unmet consumer needs, you're doing what I call innovating for the sake of it, which is not going to succeed long term. We've been around for a number of decades and we've proven that consistently. It does not change, no matter what size the company is. So each of the scenarios that I feel like each of you were talking about, I'm hearing you talk about consumer needs that are driving what your descriptors are, whether it's the physician, whether it's the mom, whether it's the AI element of trying to make my life a little easier as a marketer, to digest more information and come up with more strategies faster. But making sure that there's a clear focus and a clear connection on what is it that the consumer is looking for. Because everybody on the phone, in the room, I'm sure every person can think right now. You've been in a situation recently, you were shopping for something, it did not go the way you wanted it to, whether you couldn't find the thing you were looking for after an ad told you it should be there, but it wasn't, or it wasn't the product experience that you expected it to be. How does that impact you when you think about all those reviews that you mentioned earlier? We know how fast everybody likes to share about how bad something is. They don't tend to share as fast when the experience is good with the product. So just remembering that tie to actual consumer needs in the innovation space, no matter what type of innovation it is, can really make or break success for any.
This might be a little bit of a curveball. I didn't tee this up with you guys, but I figured you could handle it. So if I'm a leader, like we have these emergent possibilities, trends, and that sort of thing, but if leader just getting my ass kicked, I don't have time, like how do I create the capacity to start to bring some of these new ideas kind of into my toolbox, if you will, whether it's like you talked about test and learn, but I'm curious, like there's a lot of emergent possibilities, the world is shifting, changing, and yet we're tired and some of us are burned out since COVID. They're struggling to kind of get back on track. Like, how do we create the capacity to start to experiment and learn about these new things and start to build them into kind of how we operate? Just been curious. If you want to kick it off here.
We set aside 10% of our resources for a curiosity budget, and they're meant to be 10% test and learn. Half of them are going to fail, half of them are going to be okay, but at least there's being one that might work and you can scale. So I think that's the lesson learned I got from Messi Johnson way back in my career that I've funneled through in most of my companies. But setting aside 10% or 5% or whatever to do test and learn against big ideas, I think is always a good thing.
What does that look like for you, just from a leadership perspective of even building context to understand that a team member or an agency's testing something, like, or do you build 10% of your own time into studying, and like what does that look like?
Well, I mean, when I say 10%, it's funding, it's time, it's energy, output. I mean, and they can't be just willy-nilly, so you have to set up the right discipline of like, okay, what are we testing? What does success look like? What's the budget? And then what are the markers we can look at to say if it's successful or not? And then killing it if it's not working, but then reallocating those budgets, but to your point, I mean, being curious, enabling that curiosity to the organization is kind of a cultural thing, and if you give that discipline from the top, and you give the freedom and the space and the budget, that's when you get to big ideas.
Do you find yourself having to like point out, hey, this is the new tool, or this is where we could experiment, or do you feel like you're more creating the context and your team wows you with like, oh, I didn't realize we could do that.
No, that was the latter. So I think if it's top led, it doesn't go anywhere. It's saying, look, these are the big challenges. Go figure out ways to solve those challenges, and then you get better.
Anybody else want to jump in? This is
Yeah.
more of, yeah, go.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So similar to Anoop, I think just having worked on different brands over the years, whether it's Sharpie, Modelo, et cetera, kind of been around the block that there's always claw back, or there's budget cuts. You kind of find, the unconventional way of where in the P&L you can have some test and learn budget that maybe, your finance team, brand finance team might not find. It really starts from within you.
Don't label it. Here's that.
What's that?
Don't label it curiosity.
Oh, yeah, don't live, exactly, so you kind of know where that budget is, and I think what it allows you to do is just have flexibility to do test and learn ideas, so, a good example is Sharpie, so Sharpie back in 2008, we had a test and learn budget, we were one of the first brands that was doing takeovers on YouTube, we were one of the first brands advertising on Twitter at the time, and I think our mentality was, well, Sharpie's a leader brand, consumers expect Sharpie to do things, to act like a leader brand and do things that are unexpected for consumers. So taking that idea, brought it into the next series of brands is what I know allowed myself and my own team to also have that mentality. And so I think it's just building it inside of you so that it's always part of your business. And today, now as a senior leader in the organization, that's the culture I want to bring in, so that there aren't brand team members that are looking for curiosity, or the funky ways in the budget. It's now within the culture to do test and learn. So it's not something that you need to go around. It's not built into the environment.
We're gonna keep going, but the certain thing that we're gonna do Q&A here in a little bit, so please be thinking about questions.
Can I add one thing on that?
Oh, yeah.
So I think one of the things we do at eXtra Labs is a lot of times we'll do these experience tours, and learning how to draw inspiration and embrace experimentation. We'll often go to these top brands, and do these mini field trips where everyone does kind of treasure hunts for the best experience, right? So we went to the Starbucks roastery, or story, the Nike store, drawing inspiration, because especially when people are stuck in office or at home, that creativity can't get unleashed to its maximum. So how do you draw inspiration from other big brands, especially you don't have a curious budget, maybe a curious budget, and just trying to do things in a scenario where you can get the team involved to have some creative expression.
There's a theme that came out of everything they said is the people at the top don't have all the answers when it comes to innovation. And that's okay, because I'm sure you put those in the room, or even when I probably saw me smiling at their answers, because I was excited to hear these leaders of the organizations say that they're talking to their teams to find new ideas. Because the worst thing you can do, especially as a startup, the worst thing you can do is talk to yourself. Just because you started the company doesn't mean you have all the ideas. And we see that failure a lot, where there's a little bit of closed-mindedness of being willing to hear and brainstorm with other people. And I just want to say, I loved hearing that from all three of you, that you embrace that and you're weaving that into your cultures, because it's so important.
One thing it's like I would say like the 10% thing that I've done, just reflecting on the conversation as well, is it's so easy when you're busy and you don't have time. It's like somebody wants to meet with you, you don't have time. I have like these 10% of my schedule, like I'll meet with like random people. I don't know where it's gonna go, but like I feel like that's a lot of my understanding of AI, a lot of understanding of just trying to general those random conversations. And I feel like probably the last couple of years, I've done a better job of like connecting with folks and having conversations. So I think it starts with the curiosity, but then it is like, how much of your time are you setting aside to take in new information, ideas, whether it's from your team, from different sources, different people, and then actually like have the courage to start applying things.
Yeah, innovation does not happen unless you're curious. So,
Yeah. Let's open it up for questions. Curious what questions you guys have for the panel. Can we give them a round of applause real quick?
That's why I like picking on people, so I would encourage them all to ask questions.
From a non-leadership, if you're in a team and you're not in a leadership position yet, how do you recommend fostering an environment that encourages your leaders or other people in the team to think of your ideas when you're, you know, younger and starting?
I can jump in there. Like, I mean, I think if you're committed to just hustling and putting the work into her point before, like if you really are just like hustling, putting the work in and really like contributing in a high way, like at least that's, I'm more of a bootstrapping type guy, but I feel like you earn the right to speak into things. And so one is through your actions, and then I think the more you have context and understanding, like you understand what the strategy is, you understand like what we're trying to do as an organization, and then I feel like you're able to connect your ideas to that, right? But I think it starts with just investing in yourself, but again, get your reps in.
I'm a firm believer that organizations will fund good ideas or fund ideas that are generally ROI positive. So a lot of it is just framing it up with how does this idea solve a problem, or is this going to be generating a positive ROI? It doesn't have to be in business terms. It could be it's just going to make us more efficient. So I think it's just a lot about how you sell the business case internally.
Yeah, I was data driven, kind of backing data up, but I will say that especially depending on the idea, if it's an internal one and it's not necessarily consumer facing or it's gonna cause any backlash, especially in the publicity side, you know, ask for forgiveness, not permission. So in my advice, at least, I typically have done this in my past, just going out and find something. And leaders tend to respect that, even if they don't agree with it. But it's hard to argue when somebody has ambition to better their company.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Fail small, and then if it doesn't work, not a big deal. But just showing results, even on a small scale, and saying, if we put more money, more energy, it's going to scale up. Is the way to go.
All right, let's keep going. Any other questions out there? Any virtual ones coming in?
None yet.
Yo, guys.
So I have a question which relates to the first question you asked around courage. People should have to be courageous because they're facing resistance inside the organization. Can you speak to where is the resistance coming from in the sense of, you know, is it an emotional thing going on? Is it a dirt thing going on? What, in your experience, what is it that's causing all that resistance in the first place?
Say, it's gonna differ by the organization, obviously, but I think the most consistent situations I've seen over the years are usually because people are just used to doing things a certain way. And it actually takes a lot to get people to think a little differently, especially if you've been somewhere for a long time, or if the leadership has been in place for a long time. And that's usually where resistance will come from, just because you're forcing folks outside of that comfort zone that we talked about earlier on. And that's okay. Because if there's, you don't take away anything else that we talked about today, remember, the only thing that's constant is change in your personal life and your professional life. So it's more tied to that narrative of being willing to do things a little differently than they were done before.
Yeah, I think that at big companies, the biggest problem is inertia.
Mhm.
And the inertia is just an immovable force. And I think the way to overcome inertia at big companies is show the small test cases that is working and then continue to scale up. Because otherwise, if you say, hey, we want to make a big bet, people don't like big bets at the big companies.
I think the same, to me, like rings true of careers as well. Like it's easy to have inertia with what you've done and where you're at. I think having that small that mentality of trying different projects and things to build new skill sets, get exposure, I think it can create momentum for you too if you're looking to either get promoted, switch organizations, or start something better. So.
I would say also to piggyback on that, I think being empathetic towards that resistance is always important, especially if it has to do with an individual leader. Just by numbers in this room, there's probably somebody who's on the brink of divorce or relationship they have. Somebody's got a sick pet at home. Somebody has a parent that recently passed away. Somebody maybe just got a promotion. Somebody just inherited a bunch of money, right? All of these things happen all at once to everyone, right? And understanding the perspective of what somebody may be resistant towards may not even be logical, but if you understand that in your mind, it's easier, like I mentioned before, to discipline the disappointments because you say, ah, there was a boneheaded move. I remember you were saying just a minute ago that it's hard for an organization to not invest in things, especially if there's ROI. I've seen it happen so many times I can't even count. It's like, why would you not invest in that? It makes such logical sense. There's data to prove it. And for whatever reason, things just don't happen a certain way. So I think it's, again, disciplining your disappointments, being a bit more empathetic. There may be some forces in that particular scenario that are happening that you're not privy to.
Always assume positive intent, building on that. Because we may get disappointments in the workplace, whether it's from a leader, a peer, whoever, but just assume positive intent. Don't assume that somebody's out to get you, or they just don't want to listen. Actually think about it from their perspective, from an empathy standpoint. People don't know what they don't know. And sometimes it takes for you to show them with data or whatever your situation may be, why they ought to consider something else.
Let's give them a round of applause. Oh, hold on, one more.
I wanted to just touch on the disciplining and disappointments point again to the whole panel. I loved that, what you said about taking 15 seconds, group 15 seconds, then move on. I would love to know what sort of tactics and strategies the rest of have for dealing with disappointments and setbacks and from all sort of sizes.
I can start there and you all jump in. Like, I think early on, starting the garage group, like every challenge, and you kind of maybe take it personal, and it's like you're anxious about it, and I don't know if it's emotional maturity or you get battle tested, but I think the more that you can almost like control what you can control in terms of the work you put in and the inputs, and not necessarily like put a lot of emotional attachment to the outputs and the things that you can't control, the better you are. I feel like that served me well in my life. Like I focused a lot more on, from an emotional perspective, of what I can control, like in terms of my attitude. I can put the work in, I can try a bunch of shit, I think, whatever. But the things I can't control around me, people's reactions, are we gonna sign this deal, or are we gonna get this investment or not? Like, I think those things can serve you well, but I think it's easy to say, oh, just focus on the outcomes, focus on the control. For me, it's just kind of going through it and the emotional kind of maturity over time of just kind of getting to that place.
So working in a startup is like a roller coaster. The highs are high and the lows are low. And whenever I hit the low point, I mean, I do think we just got a puppy. It's been awesome. I just go take the puppy out, walk her around for a bit, and just kind of forget about things. And I think to me, it's just do the things that make you happy. Like kind of move on. It's life is tough, and you just kind of have to like let that go, let that marinate, and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about a project perspective, I think a tactic, and it takes discipline, is to do a post-campaign analysis or some post-mortem exercise to understand what went wrong, what could have been better, so that the team as a whole is able to analyze, just those actions so that it doesn't, there's a learning from it. So that the next time around, you know, you're not doing the same thing.
Let's give them a round of applause. Yeah.
Awesome, so hopefully, did everybody get some little nuggets or things that they weren't expecting tonight? So let's head shaking, exciting things that come on, right? So, these events, getting people on the stage, talking about not necessarily their day job, there's no pitching here, there's no like trying to think through it, but really just good organic feedback. If this is helpful for you, bring a friend next time. Again, as we do these every 2 months, if you're interested and you're in that kind of turmoil point for yourself, or you're trying to think what's next, or you're going through stuff at work, I do honestly also recommend going back and looking at some of the prior recordings, because we touch base on this a lot, and it always ends up with different feedback. Tonight, I personally, you reminded me so much when you said getting comfortable with uncomfortable. Like, it used to be like my mom. I used to say it all the time, and it's not as much in my current job as relevant, but it's such a life skill, in my view, to be able to get comfortable with that, and even with disappointment and letdown, that's also being uncomfortable. Like, that's not a comfortable feeling for anyone. Everybody feels their best when they're thriving, right? And so getting used to those moments of when you aren't comfortable and you're being outside your boundaries and how you get back to your best. You know, hearing those, I think, feedback tonight, I think it resonates so much. I really hope that as you guys move on with your evenings and your days, that you take some of this feedback, you meet some folks, and you continue to grow from it. So with that, we're gonna have everybody that's on the stage, we're gonna go over to that backdrop over there for a quick photo. But everyone else, please stay around for a little bit, we'll do some networking, and really appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you. Oh, actually, I have one more announcement. I forgot. If you guys are interested in continuing to participate in events like this, a couple of things I want to call out so you have on your radar from an 1871 standpoint. We have our AI Innovation Summit coming up end of June. We also have our InsurTech Innovation Summit coming up very soon. We have a really awesome, we do a big Juneteenth party, June 20, it's June 20th, it's after Juneteenth, the day after. That will also have our Black Tech Pitch Competition happening that night. If you're just looking to be around a bunch of awesome folks and innovators, highly recommend coming to some of those events. If you want unique codes to get them for free, talk to Nate and I, we will hook you up, we will get you there, but we'd love to have you guys back. If you are an innovator in the food or supply chain space as well, we're also curating that group for our upcoming labs. So would love to have you guys participate, grab Nate or I as you have questions, and I promise I'm done. Thanks, everybody.